the impacts of the coaching carousel were crazy last summer. Mark Pope shocks everyone by taking Coach Cal's spot at Kentucky, and BYU fills in with Kevin Young from the Suns and keeps a lot of players and brings in some very interesting ones that we're excited to get into today. Christian and Nick here with Mitch Harper, who covers BYU for KSL Sports. Mitch, thank you so much for joining us. You mentioned before this call started that this may be the most anticipated BYU basketball season that you can remember. Tell us how excited everybody is about this program right now.
Well, Christian, Nick, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here. Kevin Young has just injected so much energy and juice into this BYU basketball program. It's off the charts. This whole offseason, typically BYU, they are known as a football program, and the summer months are just dominated by football headlines. It was basketball all day, every day. People wanted to talk BYU basketball to where there was a conversation, a narrative around, BYU media and BYU fans. Is this becoming a basketball school? Because Kevin Young just inspires so much hope and belief that, BYU basketball, one of the, top 20 winningest programs in college basketball history, yet they have so much untapped potential as to what they could become, and they feel like they've got the guy now that can reach those heights that they've been aspiring for. And the momentum that they built in year one in the Big 12, they feel like he can take that and run with it to even higher levels. So there's so much excitement and buzz, and I think now everyone's just excited to see what the product will actually look like in games this season.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about Kevin Young. I mean, I feel like a lot of college basketball fans probably are not familiar with him, coming from the Suns. I saw he was the highest paid associate coach in the whole NBA. So leaving that to take the head coach of BYU, that's a big commitment and a big deal. But besides that, just besides being assistant at the Suns, I think he did a stint at JUCO in Utah Valley, I believe. But besides that, what can you tell us about him? And what can we expect year one out of him?
Yeah, former, he worked with Utah Valley, as you noted, and that was the last time, he started kind of build some connections in the state of Utah. And then he was a G League coach when it was the developmental league with the Utah Flash back then. And so he was in the Utah County area down the road from Provo and Orem at that time. And, he became an assistant coach with the Sixers, and he was also with the Phoenix Suns recently. And, Kevin Young has, because of all those, that journey he's taken from really the bottom up as an intern and working his way to become the highest paid assistant coach in the NBA. Along the way, he's built up so many connections, whether it be through NBA front offices, the top end agents that work with the high profile athletes in the NBA, and even the grassroots efforts. Kevin Young has just an incredible network of people that he can turn to in basketball and vet things out. And I think that's one of the reasons you've seen so many headlines on the recruiting trail with BYU this offseason, is because the influential people in the sport, whether it's grassroots or the agents that represent these five-star prospects, they know Kevin Young, they respect Kevin Young, and he's got a lot of advocates that will go to bat for him. And, and he's operating now the program BYU, modeling it after, selling it as a NBA style program. And he's got support with, Ryan Smith is someone he runs the Utah Jazz, but he loves BYU sports. Danny Ainge is always around too. So there is a feeling of this can be, kind of like an NBA operation. He's built out his support staff in the model of an NBA front office. So Kevin Young is just his path to basketball was humble beginnings, but now it's a pretty big spotlight role at BYU.
Pretty cool to look at, his history and all the different places he's been. Obviously has worked up a great reputation to be where he's at in his career so far. And also, I'm just thinking about the way he can coach and recruit, being like, I coached Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and Bradley Beal. Like, that is something that those young kids, like, that means a lot to them. And like, when you see these vacancies open up at the collegiate level, like, usually this doesn't happen. Usually it's, what 12 seed won a game, in the tournament. Like, that's where a lot of those gaps are filled. But to lose Mark Pope to Kentucky and to feel like you gain momentum is just insane. So I want to get into this roster. You keep guys like Trevin Nell, Dylan Hall, Richie Saunders, who obviously great shooters. Hall, facilitates. I think he averaged 5 assists a game last year. It was huge in that win at Fog Allen against Kansas. Fouche Traore, we call him the linebacker. Like, who is this huge 6'5" man who can, score in the post against 6'11" guys? And then, you bring in Muat Mag from Rutgers, a grown man, a defender who can sometimes shoot threes. And then Keba Keita, incredible defender at Utah. And then the freshman. Are you kidding me? Egor Demin and Kanan Catchings, two very sought after guys. Like, I know I just threw a lot at you. Let's just start with this. What do you think this starting lineup looks like? And then I'm gonna part two this question. How similar do you think this? Actually, no. I'm gonna save this. I'll keep it at this. What does the starting five look like next year?
Well, this roster, I think, Kevin Young, tapped into all the best of the buckets that he can turn to, where he's got the high-end NBA draft prospect in Egor Demin, and then Cannon Catchings has got a little bit of buzz as potentially maybe a late first-round pick maybe. I think that's kind of to be seen still for him. And then you've got the program guys, the returning veterans that understand what BYU's about. And then you've got, some specialists like Muat Mag and Keba Keita who fit what, Kevin Young wants in this program. So it really is the best of all worlds, how they constructed the roster. And this was the area of question for Kevin Young. Like, how much did he know about recruiting? How was he going to be able to build a college roster? Everyone knew about the X's and O's of Young, but he passed with flying colors in building up this roster. I look at the starting five, and Young is big on not identifying simply who's going to be the one, who's going to be the two, but I got to think Dallin Hall is going to be in that starting five. He had opportunities in the transfer portal to go to power conference programs, and he wanted to be back at BYU. When Kevin Young got hired, I think that was what brought him back. I think had it been, maybe if they would have had another direction, had they gone to a second or third tier coach, maybe a Chris Burgess candidate, because the pool was thin for BYU and its candidacy pool. They could have maybe still got him back, but it was big getting Dallin Hall back to BYU. But I would say he's going to be in the starting five. Egor Demin, he's going to be a special player, and he's one of those guys too that not only will his talent show itself, but he's going to make players around him better. Young has said he just plays the game the right way in every aspect, and he goes about it. He's just a humble kid too. And I think he's going to thrive at BYU, and he's going to be a really special talent to watch. And, I think Richie Saunders is going to be in this starting five. Saunders, they looked like he was going to be a slam dunk to go to Kentucky. There was that photo of him getting off at the airport and embracing Mark Pope. And him and Mark Pope had a strong relationship. And for him to turn down Pope and go to Kevin Young once again, that was a massive win for Young and the vision that he's selling for BYU. I got to think Richie Saunders finds a way into this lineup. The front court's going to be interesting to me. I feel like Catchings, even though he's a freshman, I feel like he's going to be spectacular for BYU. The way he shoots the ball, he's about 6'10" now. He's someone that's still growing into his body. And I think Keba Keita, that five, BYU made it clear that they wanted a rim rolling five at that spot, and Keba Keita fits that. He's one of the more explosive athletes you're going to see maybe in the Big 12 in the front court. You watch him at Utah, and his athleticism just jumps off the charts. And I think he's going to be someone that around the rim and as far as a vacuum on rebounds, he'll be really good for BYU. So that's my five right now. But, man, they've got so many options that they could turn to. You could make a case for a lot of different guys, but that would be the group I'd roll with right now.
Yeah, I just reiterate what you said. I love this roster construction. Just the high upside freshman, a good core returner, and then the transfers you have are they're veteran, gritty players. They're not flashy, but they do the little things. Keita and Mag are just, they do all of the dirty things that, a team needs. Just to expand on this roster a little more, I know Dawson Baker was hurt some last season. How's he doing coming back? Is he ready to go? And I saw you guys just signed someone like 2 days ago, Boskovic from Serbia, 6'10" big. So what can you tell us about those two guys?
Yeah, let's start with Boskovic, 6'10". He's 22 years old. He's coming into his first year in college basketball. He said that he learned English from Disney Channel. It's kind of fun. But again, Boskovic, what a addition late. And I think he's going to factor into this rotation early. It might take a little bit of time because he missed all the summer practices this offseason. But, man, when you talk about who could maybe evolve into that starting lineup, Boscovich, I feel like, has a great chance because of his size. BYU's a little bit, as far as the height goes with this team, they're not the tallest team by any stretch in the Big 12. And that's why the addition of Boscovich was huge. And he went through the NBA draft workouts this past summer. He was having workouts, I believe, with the Kings and some other teams. And to get that level of talent added to this roster late was huge for this team. So I think Boscovich will be a key piece for this team going forward. Dawson Baker's interesting. Last year going into the year, he was one of the best players in practices when we got to watch training camp practice. He looked fantastic, but that foot injury was a big issue for him. And in his brief moment that he played in non-conference, he had a really good game off the bench, and you just hope that foot would heal, and it never did. And then he played against Cincinnati in the Big 12 opener, and he just looked like, he didn't belong at the court because of that injury. Now he's ready to go, and he's expected to be a contributor to this team. It'll be interesting to see what type of role he carves out, but, I mean, he was outstanding at UC Irvine. He was an all Big West performer for the Anteaters. So, that's just, again, you go through this roster, and I feel like BYU, even though, some of the, like Bart Torvik's got BYU at 27, and I think that's fair right now, but you can really make a case that this is a preseason top 25 team when you go through this roster, and they've just got depth, they've got options, and they got players that so many guys that they can turn to that can contribute at a high level on the court.
So the part two that I saved from before, I didn't want to throw too much in one question, was stylistically, Mark Pope's teams definitely had some identity of the way they played. And last year I was a huge fan of just the way they ran their offense, the way they generated shots, because, I mean, fourth in the amount of threes they took in 3-point, like half their shots were threes, sixth in assist percentage. That ball was zipping around. They were eighth in 2-point percentage efficiency, even though they took so many threes. It's because the spacing was crazy. It was, so many driving lanes and cuts opened up off of that. And then all of Mark Pope's teams were top 35 in defensive rebounding. And, sometimes defensively they, their metrics were fine, but there were games where they struggled because, teams like Duquesne and UCF that were just physical and could get downhill. Like, those were the types of teams that they struggle with sometimes. So all that to say, I'm looking at, when you keep so many guys like Hall and Nell and Saunders and Foose, like, but then you bring in guys like that are a little bit different. Like Mag stands out to me because Mag is a 3-4, but BYU always had at least four shooters on the floor. So I'm curious how different you think this offense will look under Kevin Young. Will it be? I don't know if it's just because it's BYU or because there are like four guys staying that I'm having a tough time like picturing it looking so much different than last year because some of the personnel is the same and because you still have the 3-point shooting. But like, do you think this offense will look much different than last year? And it's a new coaching staff. Yes.
Yeah, I think there will be some differences, but I think to its core, they're still going to rely heavily on shooting the three because that's kind of the fabric of BYU basketball over the years. Like, to its core, they shoot the ball at a high clip, and I expect that that's going to still be a key piece. But I think that BYU is going to be a much more physical team this year with the addition of Keita and Mawat Mag. Those were critical additions, and I think they're going to be better equipped to handle those matchups against a Duquesne type. Because you're right, I mean, when they got up against Duquesne, the physicality, they couldn't handle it. BYU was pretty soft, and you still have Foose coming back too. And Foose has been someone that's dealt with hamstring injuries the past 2 years, and just when he was healthy, he won that Vegas. They won the Vegas Classic Showdown where they beat Arizona State, and then they beat NC State too. He was playing great ball, and then he got hurt in that NC State game, and then he was dealing with the hamstring all the rest of the last season. If he can stay healthy, man, he's an enforcer. You guys obviously know about Foose, but I think that this team will still – I think there's still a lot of learning for us in the media, too, about what Kevin Young's going to do, because I just feel like he's going to be – he's had to slow it down a little bit. He's even acknowledged that with how he teaches and practices. that some of the things that he's just tossed out for years to pro athletes, it's not being picked up as quickly by these, college guys now. So he's almost had to, at times, slow things down a little bit in the way he's teaching these guys compared to how he taught NBA guys. And there's a lot more practicing too in college than he ever dealt with in the NBA. But I think that this team, I'm fascinated to see really what the identity becomes. But to its core, they're still going to be a team that shoots a lot of threes, not to the volume, I think, of what Mark Pope's team did a year ago. But that's still going to be a big piece for what they do.
Tempo wise, they were top 25 last season. You see them being top 25 again this season?
I don't. I mean, I could still see them be maybe they're still going to be a good pace, like top 40. But Pope wanted to become like the fastest tempo team. That's what he wanted to be, and that was a big push by them. But I just don't see Kevin Young forcing that as much. But I think again, I think that it's going to be, this team will have. I can't wait to see the chess matches between Kevin Young and Bill Self and Kelvin Sampson, because that really, when he got hired, Kevin Young, it was like, that's where he is going to shine. I think people had some reservations about what he could do with roster construction, recruiting. He passed, like I said, but that's where I think in-game adjustments, and I think that's where there's some issues there for BYU last year. And I think Kevin Young is, when his staff, I mean, he's got a coaching staff too, with Will Voigt, who started his basketball coaching living with Greg Popovich. He was an intern for the Spurs, and he was living in a guest bedroom at Greg Popovich's house. Will Voigt, Tim Fanning, who coached in the G League, or coached Overtime Elite, also worked in the G League. They've got a director of basketball ops, Jordan Brady, who was once a G League head coach. I mean, they've got so much, coaching and background to. I think the game plans, what they're going to create, is going to be just fascinating to see. And then you got Brandon Dunson and Chris Burgess, and then John Linehan from St. Joe's. I think this coaching staff, they will be able to throw some looks that that maybe sometimes you don't expect it to go up against a certain matchup. So I think this is going to be a really fun team to watch.
So speaking on that, we've mentioned that we've liked the way this roster is pieced together, and it's got some, complementary pieces. Something that is interesting to me is you've got guys like Trevin Nell and Richie Saunders, who I know Nell specifically was born in 1998, but it's like you've got these old guys who've been in college basketball for a while, and then 18-year-olds, and one's coming from Europe, and it's an interesting dynamic. And I assume obviously these older guys who have been here, like Hall and Nell and Saunders and Foose, are the leaders of this team, and then Keba and Mwat, they've been around too. So how have the transfers and the guys who've been here for a while, who are so much older, fused with these younger guys? And I know there's a couple other 4-star freshmen here that we haven't really talked about yet, in Crawford and Kozlowski. But yeah, in terms of a new coaching staff, that varying mix of age and time at BYU, how is all that meshing together, and how do you expect the chemistry and leadership to transpire this season?
The leaders of this team are Dallin Hall, Trevin Nell, and Richie Saunders, and Kevin Young has made that clear. Those have been the leaders that emerged in summer, and it's one of the reasons that he feels that this team could be pretty good, and because of the leadership of those guys. And it hasn't been a case of those three telling the new faces, this is how we do it. I think they've had an open mind too about they want to embrace what Kevin Young's vision is and how he wants this program to operate, but also understanding the uniqueness of BYU and what it's like to navigate a school that has an honor code and has really some unique differences than any other college basketball program in America. And those guys have been beneficial in that front. And I think Mawat Mag has just been a veteran that is a huge addition to the locker room for BYU. And I think his impact on the defensive end, one, but then two, in that locker room, I think that's important, because that will be an interesting dynamic with BYU basketball, because it's been reported and there's been a lot of speculation about who's getting what with NIL. how does that all come together? Because at some point they're going to face adversity this season. Last year we saw BYU, they dropped 2 of 3 against Kansas State and Oklahoma State, and they looked to be sliding before they won that big game at Kansas and really got back on the good side of the bracket. But, there will be stretches in this Big 12 where they will be tested. And how does this locker room really, kind of come together and that unity, because it's all good right now. And it's in look, the good times for Kevin Young, I think, are going to be here for a while. It's not like it's going to be honeymoon could be over soon, but for this team, if they want to reach the heights that they want to, they're going to have to navigate adversity. I'm curious to see how this group performs on that front. But Hall, Nail, and Saunders, they are the leaders of this team, and I think that the newcomers too are have really embraced those guys, and I think there's a good kind of relationship and energy about this team going into this year. They didn't have a foreign trip or anything like that this offseason, so they didn't get that chance to have that. But official practices began last week, and this has been a group that's been pretty competitive in the summer practices, so that's expected to carry over here into these official practices as well.
I'm excited for BYU basketball. The hype, the vibes, the buzz, everything is real and legit. And it's good to see the football program doing really well right now. And I think the basketball program, we don't do projections on this show, but I'd be shocked if they don't finish top 4 or 5 in the Big 12 this season.
The thing is I have them right now about 6 in the Big 12, and I just think you think of Houston, you go Kansas, Iowa State. I mean, you guys know as well as anyone. I think Cincinnati's really interesting with all the experience they've got back with Jizzle James and Bandango back. But BYU though has kind of got this just interesting upside and unknown potential that feels like, man, if it hits, it could be. It maybe could be. And I think what's interesting too is that they could be a team, and with Young, that they could really, make headway with and change how some programs operate in this sport. I mean, because Kevin Young and the way he's building things out with his staff and his office, with how they're attacking the portal and how they approach NIL. I mean, it could really change the game in the Big 12 and maybe college basketball nationally. So this is a big time program now that's I think going to have to be looked at every year. And the way that they're recruiting, I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. Kevin Young's going to have BYU as maybe a national talking piece for quite some time. And I think it's going to be very interesting. And that's a new world that BYU has not operated in at all. They had that, a couple of years with Jimmer, and they had Danny Ainge once upon a time. But this is a BYU basketball program that's looking to become a national player for the first time really ever in its history.
Absolutely. And even just to add on to that point a little more, the European recruitment, obviously that's something that's continued to, it's not that European players haven't been in college, but, guys coming who are older, guys coming who are legit lottery picks and everything. Like, I don't know. In the stacked Big 12 with that home court environment, I think the ceiling is super high for BYU. Last thing before I let you leave, Mitch. One last pitch on Egor Demin. Like, is this a guy that could be like a legit, like top 10 pick, like really, really ball out this year? Like how good could this kid be?
I believe so. I mean, he's spectacular. I mean, in his build too, his height, his length, and he has just got all the tools to be just a spectacular player. I think it's going to be the who's who of NBA execs every night at BYU games. As me and the media, I can't wait to just see the NBA faces rolling through the Marriott Center every night. Egor's going to be special. And I just think that too, when we talked about locker room, he's going to be a huge addition there too. I mean, he is such a humble kid. Just my limited interactions with him, he's someone that, I mean, I feel like he's just so open to Provo and learning about him. He's from Russia, then he went to Real Madrid, and this is all new to him. But he speaks great English, and so that hasn't been a transition. Sometimes you kind of wonder about that, if there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve on just communication and understanding the terminology and the coaching styles that you have to adjust for that. That's been okay, and he just operates like a pro. I was talking with John Linehan, BYU assistant coach, a couple months back about Egor, and he just said he's got all the ability in the world to to be a special player. I mean, and John Linehan's noteworthy because he recruited Anthony Edwards and, coached him at Georgia, worked with him on that staff. And so he's seen high-level guys. And that's the thing, too, is that this whole staff has been around just some big names, the biggest names in the NBA and in basketball. This staff's been around them. So they know what that looks like. They know what it takes to how to coach, how to work, how to communicate, how to develop those guys. And I think those sort of pitches appeal to Egor. And I think he's embracing BYU. And I think he's going to be just a special, special player. I look at him. He's the biggest recruit that BYU signed since Sean Bradley, and that was in the early 90s. They've signed only 3 guys 5 stars in BYU history from my tracking, going back to Danny Ainge when he signed in the 70s. I mean, this is historic stuff. And, BYU's got a legendary player that came from overseas in the 70s and Kresimir Kosic. And he kind of really reinvented how European athletes were viewed for college basketball. He became one of the first. He was a pioneer in that front. And I think Egor could really be kind of set the new era for BYU when it comes to international recruiting and maybe set a trend for BYU. He's going to be a spectacular talent. He's going to be must-see.
Well, Mitch, you've been fantastic. We appreciate your time. Exciting time for this BYU program in Provo, and it's going to be a fun season for sure.
Thanks, guys. Can't wait. It gets me excited. I mean, the BYU and the Big 12 basketball, it's going to be dynamite every single night. So can't wait to see it, and looking forward to hopefully maybe talking to you guys once again.